laughed at the human frigate right before it turned the tide. HFY Sci-Fi story. It wasn't a battleship. It wasn't a dreadnought or a cruiser or anything the galaxy respected. It was just a Terran frigate, a small, undergunned, overaged relic of an era no one remembered. So when the great armadas gathered, when the enemy unleashed war on the scale of stars, they laughed. They laughed at the humans. They laughed at their frigate. Until it fired. They called it the TNS Daring. It was a name handed down, like a family heirloom, tarnished, cracked, but still fiercely worn. The hull bore the scars of forgotten skirmishes. Paint peeled along its spine. Its engines wheezed with every jump. But it still flew. Commander Rhea Voss stood on the bridge, arms crossed, one boot up on the rail as she stared through the forward viewport. "Still think they're gonna laugh when we get there?" Her XO, Lieutenant Harkin, grunted. They'd been laughing since the briefing. We're the only frigate in a fleet of cruisers. We're the punchline, not the plan. The HUD lit up with incoming fleet signatures. Vornax dreadnoughts, Thalan storm cruisers, even a Makari plasma brigade. Every ship gleamed with the arrogance of funding, of polish, of tactical dominance. And there, trailing in formation, was the Daring, a ship barely held together by grafted modules and willpower. Rhea smirked. "Good. Let 'em laugh." She turned to her crew, bare bones but brutal. They weren't the best trained or the most refined, but they were Terran Navy, and they'd bled together before. "Status on the stealth relay?" "Stable, ma'am. Still piggybacking off the Makari's sensor blind spot. We're invisible unless someone looks really hard. Let's hope they don't." The enemy was the Ulari Hive. Biomechanical nightmares. Ships grown, not built. Weapons that devoured matter instead of firing it. A swarm so vast it eclipsed moons. The Allied fleets had gathered at Soren's Reach, a final defense line before the Ulari spread deeper into the core worlds. Voss had read the projections. They were going to lose. The simulations said so. Unless something unexpected happened. Something small, insignificant, like a Terran frigate that nobody respected. The plan was simple. The Ulari hive mind operated through distributed neural relays. Most were protected deep within the swarm. But one, a central command node, had been detected. Briefly, by mistake. It was a fleeting pulse, shielded in gravity wells and dark energy shrouds. No conventional fleet could reach it, not without being torn apart. But the Daring wasn't conventional. It was fast, when it was small. So small, in fact, that it could slingshot around the Vossen asteroid belt, dive through the ion storm fields, and hit that node before the swarm even realized it was a target. If it survived. "Course plotted," Harkin said. "It's a one-way run, Commander. Once we break cover, we've got 15 minutes to reach the node and fire. After that, will be a memory," Rhea finished. She looked around the bridge. Her crew met her eyes, one by one. None flinched. "I'm not here for medals," she said. "I'm not here for history books. I'm here because we don't run. Not from monsters, not from odds. Not when the galaxy needs someone to try." They nodded. No cheers. Just silence. The kind that meant resolve. The kind that meant, let's make them regret underestimating us. "Punch it," she said. And the frigate that nobody feared vanished into the storm. The ion storm struck the Daring like a living beast. Lightning flared across the hull. Static arced between sensor arrays. The inertial dampeners screamed against every wild lurch. Within the bridge, lights dimmed as power rerouted automatically. "Status," Rhea barked. "Shields holding at 63%. Hull integrity. Fluctuating," Harkin reported, gripping the console as sparks sprayed across engineering. They had entered the Vossen storm belt, a swirling mass of radiation-choked clouds and magnetic anomalies that had swallowed entire scout wings. No ship had passed through it intact, until now. "This is madness," muttered Ensign Leva, voice shaking. "No," Rhea said, eyes fixed ahead. "This is the only way they won't see us coming." Behind them, the Allied fleets held formation, watching, waiting, oblivious to what the Daring was doing. The Ulari didn't notice either. Not yet. Each second was a test. The storms distorted sensors, gravity, even time. But the crew had trained for this, not in simulations, but in the worst corners of Terran space. The belt of Ganira, the phage rings, places that made better nav officers quit. But Harkin wasn't just good. He was Terran trained. "I've got the node," he said suddenly. "Confirmed ping. Dead center of the eye, but what? It's moving." "What?" "The node's not stationary. It's riding a bioship. Massive. Think, asteroid scale. It's adapting, trying to relocate its signal core." Rhea clenched her jaw. "That means they know we're coming." "They don't know who's coming," Harkin muttered, punching in new intercept vectors. The crew locked in. Sweat trickled down faces. Hands trembled over controls. No one spoke. They dove. The bioship emerged through the storm like a leviathan of bone and light. It didn't fire. It simply pulsed. A psychic wave radiated through the ether. The crew winced as phantom memories echoed through their skulls. Shadows of dead systems, cries of annihilated worlds. The Ulari didn't need words. Their presence alone unraveled lesser minds. But humans were stubborn. Rhea gritted her teeth. "Initiate blackout protocol, manual control, no AI input. I want every system dead silent." "Aye, Commander." The bridge dimmed. Displays flickered to minimal readouts. Heartbeats filled the silence. One torpedo, one shot. The Daring was never built to destroy anything this large. But it carried a legacy payload. Something ancient, forbidden, stored deep within Terran vaults since the First Contact War. The Mark X Singularity Lance. Unstable, unproven, unforgivable. "But if it worked?" "Target locked," Harkin whispered. "Node is exposed. No external shielding." Rhea nodded. She reached for the firing control, paused, and whispered, "Let this matter." Then she pressed the trigger. The torpedo launched. Straight into the heart of the storm, and the Daring turned away, fleeing before the universe could collapse around it. Behind them, silence, then light. A black bloom expanded across the storm. Gravity spasmed, time fractured. Even the Ulari scream was sucked into the void. And the node? Gone. The hive went blind. Across the system, the Allied fleets watched as the swarm twisted in confusion, turning on itself, crashing into its own ships. A chorus of questions lit up command channels. What happened? Did they strike the node? Who did that? And far behind the retreating shockwaves, crawling out of the storm like a wounded ghost, the Daring emerged. Scarred, smoking, alive. And now, the laughing had stopped. The moment the hive node collapsed, the battlefield changed. Across Soren's reach, the Ulari swarms faltered. Their once flawless formations spiraled into chaos. Command links severed, feedback loops twisted. Biomechanical vessels slammed into each other, their instincts scrambling without central guidance. The Allied fleets didn't understand what had happened, but they knew one thing: the tide had turned. "Fire everything," ordered Admiral Tavel from the Thalan warcruiser verdict. "Push now. They're disoriented." The Makari brigade surged forward. Plasma beams cut through hull and hide. Dreadnought cannons roared. In the chaos, one question echoed through every fleet's command line. Who fired the shot? No one answered, because no one saw the Daring. Inside the Terran frigate, systems flickered. Fires burned in 3 compartments. Life support was erratic. Shields were gone, but the cores still pulsed. Rhea sat slumped in her command chair, blood streaming from her temple. "Report," she croaked. Harkin wiped soot from his face. "We're alive. Hull integrity is critical. We're leaking everything but courage. Rhea coughed a laugh. I'll take it. Commander, Ensign Leva said softly. Did we actually do it? Scan the field. Leva tapped her console. Her breath caught. The node's gone. Completely. The swarm's splintering. For a long moment, the crew stared at each other. And then they began to laugh. Not out of joy. Out of sheer disbelief. They had done it. A frigate. A crew of 37. One torpedo. And the war had changed. The enemy began to adapt. Despite the confusion, some Ulari vessels found new paths. They formed fractal clusters. Erratic but deadly. Without centralized command, they became wild. Less strategic. More violent. And some of them noticed the drifting daring. They see us, Leva said, panic creeping into her voice. Range? 4,000 kilometers and closing. Weapons? Offline. Everything. We've got maybe 2 decoy mines left and half a thruster. Rhea pushed herself upright. Can we make it to the wreck field? Harkin nodded. If we drift, maybe. Do it. Cut power. Let's look like debris. The daring darkened once more, sliding toward a graveyard of shattered Ulari ships. Hulls twisted in grotesque spirals, corpses of a dying mine. As the Ulari fighters zipped overhead, scanning, sniffing, searching, the crew of the Daring held their breath. They were so close. Too close. One drone turned back. Its scanners ignited. Commander, Harkin whispered. It's charging weapons. And then a flash. A beam. But not from the Daring. A Terran cruiser dropped from hyperspace behind the swarmling and obliterated it in a single shot. The TNS Resolute. Frigate Daring, this is Captain West of the Resolute. We have eyes on you. Brace for tow. The Daring didn't respond. The crew just exhaled. Hard. Back at Fleet Command, the message spread. A single Terran frigate had struck the node. A single ship had changed the war, and the galaxy had stopped laughing. The Daring drifted in silence, her hull now a canvas of burns and breaches. Inside, the medbay flickered under emergency lights, smelling of plasma sealant and scorched circuits. Commander Rhea Voss lay in a recovery pod, patched and sedated. Across from her, Ensign Leva stood quietly, holding a datapad she didn't read. She'll make it, the medic whispered. Leva nodded, but didn't speak. Her fingers trembled. Not from fear, but from the come-down, from surviving the impossible. Elsewhere, Harkin stood at the bridge, now manned only by 3 crew. The command chair sat empty, its edges scorched. He looked out at the stars and whispered, "They'll never understand what this cost." Across Allied channels, messages flowed. The Daring's action report was dissected by analysts, commanders, and historians in real time. The simulation networks showed millions of failed attempts. Yet this ship, this underpowered relic, had done what entire fleets could not. They had turned the tide. And now the crews of other ships looked at each other with new eyes. If they can do that, what can we do? The ripple had begun. The TNS Resolute extended a dock cradle, wrapping the Daring in magnetic arms and stabilizing her hull. Supply drones surged in. Medics, mechanics, and comm officers flooded through the airlocks. Harkin didn't step aside. Not at first. "You don't get to sanitize what happened here," he told the brass-clad officer leading the boarding team. "We're here to help," the officer replied. "Then help. But this ship tells her own story. Don't rewrite it." The officer met his eyes, then nodded. Understood. 3 hours later, Commander Rhea Voss stood again. She wore fresh fatigues. Her face was bandaged. Her walk was unsteady, but her voice? Sharp. "What's our next assignment?" she asked. Captain West of the Resolute blinked. "You're grounded. Technically, you're a galactic hero." "I didn't ask about ceremonies. I asked for orders." West smiled faintly. "You're Terran to the bone, Voss." She raised a brow. "And you're avoiding the question." He sighed. "Fleet Command wants you back on Earth. Debrief, interviews, commendations." She looked past him, at the stars. "Then they'll need to court-martial me. I don't leave mid-battle. Within the Terran sector fleet, her refusal echoed. One by one, captains began to report their desire to remain at Soren's reach. Engineers volunteered for long-haul refits. Fighters asked to fly recovery runs. No one asked to go home. Because a relic had made a point too loud to ignore. Rhea stood at the viewing deck as another wave of Ulari wreckage drifted by. Some of it still pulsed, twitching with residual hive signals. She whispered, "We didn't win. We bought time." Harkin nodded beside her. "Time we won't waste." And the Daring, still scarred, still defiant, began her refit, because the war wasn't over. But the galaxy had learned something vital. Never underestimate a ship, or the crew, willing to die for everyone else. So Soren's Reach was no longer a battleground. It was a graveyard of giants. But the Ulari were not extinct, only wounded. Across the far quadrant, new signals emerged. Scattered, furious, adaptive. The hive mind may or may have fractured, but fragments still hunted, driven by instinct and rage. In the shadow of wreckage, the Daring floated among the great fleet, now a symbol. Inside the CIC, Rhea stood beside Harkin, reviewing the latest telemetry. The refit was barely complete. Half the systems still glitched. 2 weapon arrays offline, but the crew was already back in formation. "Enemy flares detected," Harkin said. 100,000 kilometers out. Broken swarm. "Looks like they're searching." "They're looking for blood," Rhea replied. "They lost their command brain. Now they want vengeance. Terran fleet recommends fallback. High command wants to preserve us." She looked up sharply. "We're not a museum piece. We're not done." Rhea tapped the map. "We intercept. We don't wait to be hunted." "Then we lead it," Harkin said. She nodded. "Patch me through." The message went out system-wide. "This is Commander Rhea Voss of the TNS Daring. The Ulari aren't regrouping. They're lashing out. If we let this cluster hit the repair fleets, it'll undo everything we've held." She paused. "I don't ask you to follow us. I just ask you not to forget why we're here." And she cut the transmission. Minutes later, 7 ships moved into formation behind the Daring. Small ships, fighters, old patrol craft, a mining tug repurposed for defense. They weren't heroes, but they understood. As they approached the flare zone, tension grew thick. The Ulari cluster was erratic, vessels with uneven speed and power signatures. They tore through debris indiscriminately, swatting apart drones, carving into civilian rescue units. "They're targeting non-combatants," Leva said, voice hollow. Rhea's jaw clenched. "Then let's remind them we're still here." The Daring opened fire. Plasma rounds danced between the wrecks. Each strike was surgical, deliberate. The smaller support ships followed, weaving in and out of cover. And then the swarm screamed. Not with noise, but with motion. 12 Ulari corvettes turned at once. Toward the Daring. Toward the heart of the fight. Harkin glanced at Rhea. "Still think they're done laughing?" She smirked. "I hope they are." The Ulari corvettes surged like a tidal scream. Erratic, predatory, furious. 12 of them bore down on the Daring, each thrumming with residual hive rage. No tactics, no finesse. Just raw, gnashing momentum. Inside the bridge, red warning lights painted every surface. Collision paths, impact simulations, strike vectors. All of it scrolling fast. Harkin slammed his hands on the console. "We're not outfitted for this many." "We weren't outfitted for the last fight either," Rhea replied, voice calm. "Doesn't mean we didn't win it." She turned to her crew. "Ready the spine torpedoes. Angle for strafing fire. Pull them in, then break them." Leva's fingers danced across the targeting array. "Lances locked. Auto-target on your mark. Hold it. Hold." On screen, the corvettes fanned into a crescent. They wanted to crush the Daring in a pincer. Rhea waited. Not yet. Not until now. Twin torpedoes fired from the ventral pod, streaking straight through the swarm's center. They didn't aim to kill, they aimed to scatter. A direct hit. The swarm split. "Break left, "Launch mines!" Rhea shouted. The Daring twisted sideways, its smaller allied craft moving with it, like a synchronized school. Explosive mines detonated behind them, chewing up the rear corvettes in shockwaves of white heat. Harkin whooped. "That's 4 down!" Rhea didn't celebrate. 8 still breathing. Recalculate their angles. They're learning. And they were. The next volley came tighter, more precise. The Ulari might be fractured, but their fragments still learned fast. One corvette cut across the Daring's underbelly, scraping its outer shield and ripping through a sensor bank. Leva screamed. Sparks exploded from her station. "Get her to med!" Rhea barked, catching her before she collapsed. But Leva grabbed her forearm. "I'm fine, don't stop. Don't let them win." Rhea hesitated, then nodded. "Patch targeting to my console," Harkin said, taking Leva's position. "We'll get you your angles, Commander." Outside, the battlefield narrowed. The wreckage field became a cage. Broken hulls, drifting limbs, magnetic wakes. The Daring danced through it like a wounded predator. Behind them, their ragtag fleet held the line. A mining tug slammed into an Ulari corvette on purpose, igniting its fusion core in a blaze of mutual destruction. A scout craft dropped its last charges, point blank, buying just enough time for the Daring to reload. And then silence. 2 Ulari ships remained, bloodied, slowed. One turned to flee. The other charged. Rhea met its advance head-on. "Spinal gun, manual fire." Harkin's eyes widened. "That'll burn the core." She didn't blink. "Then light it up." The beam tore through space, a blinding blue lance that cut the final Ulari corvette in half. Only drifting ash remained. And above the ruins, the Daring held position. A flickering, burning, battered blade. The war was still far from over. But in this sector, on this day, the line had held. And it had teeth. When the debris cleared and the last Ulari ship went cold, a strange hush fell across the sector. It wasn't peace. It was the eye of a new kind of storm, one born not from destruction, but from clarity. The Daring held its orbit as the ragtag fleet around it regrouped. Fires were extinguished. Shields recalibrated. Bodies retrieved. Both Terran and alien, they had lost 6 Allied vessels in the last engagement. But the sector held. Rhea stood alone in the observation corridor, overlooking the field. From this angle, the stars peeked through the curling fog of battle. Harkin entered, his arms still in a makeshift sling. "They want to talk to you," he said. "Who's they this time?" Rhea asked. "Fleet Command, the Galactic Assembly. A dozen more who didn't believe in us yesterday." She didn't turn. "Let them wait. You know they're rewriting the books. This ship's a rallying cry now." "Then let them rally. We've got more to do." Across the Allied network, the Daring's footage was broadcast sector to sector. Pilots and officers watched in silence as the damaged frigate executed impossible maneuvers, as its crew faced the swarm without hesitation. On Makari outposts and Thalan academies, new recruits watched in reverence. "This is what resolve looks like," an instructor declared. "Not armor, not firepower, will." The Galaxy had laughed, but now it leaned forward. Back aboard the Daring, Rhea finally agreed to address the fleet. Her message was short, unpolished, not rehearsed. This ship was never meant to lead a fleet. We were a last-line scout. Old code, outdated specs. Half the time we had to patch systems by hand. She paused. But we had each other, and that meant we had everything. She looked into the lens. You don't need to be powerful. You just need to be present. Show up when it matters. Stay when it's hard. Hold the line, even if no one else will. She cut the feed. The Ulari were not done. Scattered remnants still clawed through systems. Some tried to rebuild. Some mutated beyond control. The war would rage on. But now they knew what waited. Not titans, not fleets. Just a ship, a crew, and the refusal to be erased. And in command centers across the stars, when analysts whispered about the next battles, One phrase kept returning. Watch for the ones like Daring. Repairs continued for weeks. Not in sterile bays or orbital dry docks, but under the stars, among the wreckage. The Daring never left the front line. Not while signals still flickered from the edge of the system. Not while survivor ships limped in from shattered sectors. Every patch, every weld, every recalibration was done by hand. The crew refused transfers. Medics worked beside engineers. Veterans taught rookies with soot on their faces. Rhea stood on the hangar floor, clipboard in hand, grease smudged across her cheek. We're turning the old forward housing into a med suite, she said. We'll need it. Harkin wiped sweat from his brow. Didn't think we were signing up to be a mobile hospital. We signed up to help. Doesn't matter how. Across the system, echoes of the Ulari node strike continued to ripple. Smaller fleets pushed deeper into previously unreachable zones. Civilian transports returned. Colonies began to rebuild. Confidence spread, not from command centers, but from one name whispered everywhere. Daring. On the deck of a Galaxy scout ship, a junior officer traced the frigate's battle path across a holographic map. We keep calling them lucky, she said, but maybe they're just stubborn enough to matter. Her captain nodded. Maybe that's all we've ever needed to win. The Galactic Assembly requested Rhea's presence. Again. She sent a recording instead. My crew doesn't serve for statues. We serve because someone has to. If you want to honor that, don't build a monument. Build resolve. Teach your recruits what sacrifice looks like, what duty feels like. And the Assembly, for once, listened. Months passed. New ships joined the Daring's patrols, crews inspired by the tale. They weren't elite, they weren't new. But they were there, again and again, holding the line. Rhea stood once more at the observation deck, now restored. Stars shimmered across the horizon, cleaner than before. Leva approached, walking with a limp but smiling. We got a ping. Fringe system, stranded convoy. No comms. Rhea didn't hesitate. Plot a course. As the Daring turned toward new coordinates, her engines flared brighter than ever. She wasn't polished. She wasn't feared. But she was present. And in every quiet call across the stars, every whisper of desperation sent into the void, there was hope. Because now they knew. Sometimes the smallest ship sends the loudest answer. Sometimes the ones they laugh at are the ones who never leave, the ones who stay. The Daring wasn't pristine. She bore her history across her hull, patched scars, mismatched plating, sensor arrays held together by faith and welding tape. But everywhere she went, she drew reverent silence. When she arrived at Bastion 3, a frontier supply station, the docking crews saluted before she broadcast her name. Rhea hated it. Not because of pride, but because the myth was growing bigger than the truth. We didn't do anything they wouldn't have done, she muttered to Harkin as they walked through the gangway. Difference is, we did it, he replied, when no one else would. Inside Bastion's command center, Admiral Kuno greeted her personally. Commander Voss, a pleasure to finally meet the face behind the legend. I don't wear myths well, sir, she said flatly. Good, Kuno nodded, because I didn't call you here for handshakes. We have a problem. He gestured to a tactical display. An arc of deep space flickered red. We believe a new Ulari strain is forming. An offshoot, decentralized, faster, operating like mercenaries. No hive, just instinct and rage. Rhea frowned. They've evolved. Adapted, Kuno corrected. And they're hitting outer systems hard. Scattered colonies, medical routes. They're not hunting fleets. They're hunting fear. And you want Daring to go? You're the only ship that's faced them and lived. The people trust your name. That buys time. Rhea nodded. Then we'll buy it. Back on board, she called a full crew assembly. Every crew member stood in silence. Scars, injuries, cybernetic limbs and all. We've been asked to go again, she began, into unknown space. No reinforcements, no backup. No one flinched. You don't have to come, she said. This time it's truly voluntary. Kale raised his hand. If I leave, I'll miss the best part. What's that? Rhea asked. The look on their faces when we show up again. The room erupted into quiet, steady laughter. Resolve. Conviction. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were a message. When the Daring left Bastion 3, every ship in dock flashed their running lights 3 times. Not as a salute, as a promise. That the line still held. That the fire still burned. The stars over Epsilon Crya burned pale blue, their shimmer disrupted only by the storm belt that framed the sector like a crown of smoke. That's where the Daring drifted now. A recon signal had pinged 2 hours earlier, faint, distorted, definitely Terran. Rhea stood at the command rail, eyes fixed on the drifting data. Could be a trap, Harkin warned, or a survivor, she said. He gave a tired nod. We've chased worse odds. The Daring turned toward the storm. Inside the comms bay, Leva listened through the noise. The voice was weak, crackling beneath static, but real. Don't leave, please, anyone. She boosted the signal, her eyes stinging with focus. Rhea, it's them. A colony transport. Crashed. Barely got the message out. Rhea didn't hesitate. Prep shuttles, patch in med teams. We go now. The landing was brutal. Lightning scraped the hull as the drop pods deployed. The storm wasn't just atmospheric. It was living. A twisted electromagnetic field stirred by lingering Ulari wrecks. But they pushed through. The colony was buried under a landslide of wreckage and flame. Fires burned blue-green. Bodies lay where shelters had collapsed. And in the middle of it all, a single flare still burned. The Daring's crew fanned out. Kale's voice cracked over comms. Multiple survivors, injured, starved, but alive. Rhea found a child trapped beneath fractured polymer, her lungs barely drawing air. You held on, Rhea whispered, lifting the wreckage. The girl opened her eyes. We waited. You don't have to anymore. They didn't save everyone, but they saved enough. And as the rescue concluded, the storm began to break. The blue glow faded into orange dawn. Leva stood outside the main shuttle, tears drying on her cheeks. This is what we do now, isn't it? Rhea nodded. It's who we've become. Not warriors. No, she said. Witnesses, guardians, reminders. When the Daring left the system, the survivors watched in silence. No salutes, no medals, just hope. Hope that the galaxy hadn't forgotten. Hope that even the smallest ship could change everything. And somewhere deep in space, as the last Ulari frequency flickered out for good, a message echoed through forgotten channels. Ship identified, TNS Daring. Tactical priority, avoid. Status, indestructible. Because they had laughed. But now they remembered, and the Daring still flew. This wasn't the story of a mighty fleet. It wasn't about superior firepower, advanced tech, or perfect tactics. It was about belief. A belief that even the smallest force, if it stood firm, if it stayed, could shape the fate of galaxies. The TNS Daring was never meant to be a legend. But legends are born not from design. They're born from fire, from defiance, from the refusal to disappear quietly. And across every shattered star, every hopeful broadcast, and every whisper of resistance, they no longer laughed. They remembered. Because in the end, the Daring proved one thing, that the heart of humanity doesn't rest in its might, it rests in its will.